If you listen to enough of this podcast, you might be concerned that we're approaching a major collapse of governments, financial markets, or even the Western developed world in its entirety. So when the revolution comes, do you want to be out of shape and unable to defend yourself, or do you want to be fighting fit? Why not try Fight Camp? Fight Camp is interactive at-home boxing. They bring the best workout in the world into your home and make it fun. Explore thousands of workouts led by expert trainers with decades of experience teaching proper boxing form and technique. Fight Camp has live punch counting stats that motivate you by counting every punch throughout your workout and pushing you to meet goals every single round. As you progress, you'll unlock achievements and can go head to head against other members, whether they're across the country or across your living room. One of the best things about Fight Camp is that it makes boxing accessible to everyone, no matter what fitness level you're at, what your age is, or what your experience with boxing is. You can do it. And you're going to have a great time as well. So join the biggest boxing community in the world without ever leaving your home. Fight Camp packages start at just $99. They even offer some great financing options, so you can get started for just $9 a month. To get everything you need, go to fightcamp.com/chatter to learn more. That's fightcamp.com/chatter. CHATTER. Brilliant. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chatter. Today I am here with Dan, King Bingo on Twitter, and the YouTube channel's name is, let me forget, Dissident Factor.
That's the one.
So, Dan, thanks very much for coming on the show. You are, described as a former venture capitalist focused on emerging technologies and digital trends who now mines Bitcoin and podcasts about the end of the financial system. So that was enough to intrigue me into wanting to get you on the show. So welcome, man.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, it seems that we are interested in a lot of the same kind of things. So I guess the first real question I have for you is what turned you from a venture capitalist into a Bitcoiner and a podcaster? Like, was there something like specific that happened, like a big catalyst?
Yeah, I mean, it was partially accidental. So I spent about 20 years working in this city. Well, actually, I started off as a bit of a political apparatchik. I started off working with the Tories, and I worked on the Patillo campaign whenever that was, about 20 odd years ago.
Okay.
Now, had that have been successful, I probably would have ended up doing the whole politics routine. I'd probably be a Tory MP now, and I know lots of people who are. I'm glad that it didn't come to that because of my opinions on politics now. But no, that didn't work. So then I went into the city. I spent about 20 years there. And the way it works with venture capital funds is typically you raise money for a fund, and that fund lasts for about 10 years. So it was actually at the point where the fund that I was working on was beginning to wrap up. It was very close to wrapping up. I didn't want to continue with the rollover that they were doing because they were moving in a different direction to the kind of thing that I wanted to do. So I naturally stepped away at that point because I had two small children. And actually I wanted to spend a little bit more time with them because I'd barely seen them. Then that was just before lockdowns, and then lockdowns happened, and that was weird, and I didn't really want to be rushing back into something while that was going on. And that sort of, that sort of was a sort of a bit of a natural break point, right? And then we had lockdowns. And it sort of pushed me from being essentially a sort of a mainstream guy into being somebody who was so utterly disgusted with the political system and what I saw and what they felt was their rights to take away our rights and our freedoms. And actually, this has been building for a while because, I mean, I was pretty upset with the way that 2008 went down. But back then, I think I fell into the trap that a lot of people fell into, which is, okay, bad decisions were made. All we need to do is we need to change the people in charge. We just need to get better people. Instead of that group of faces over there with a whatever color rosette, get those people over there with that color rosette, or shuffle the leadership around within it, and that will make everything better. And really, by the time I got to by that lockdown period, I realized that actually it's the system itself which is fundamentally flawed. So yeah, that's a long answer to why I'm sort of out of it now. But I'm deeply concerned about the way that we're headed, and especially when you have young children as well. I think that, and we get into this, I think that the 20s are going to be a very tumultuous period. And there is going to be, there's going to be reform on the other side of it, and it is essential that we go into that period of reform after this period of crisis with the right understandings and the right assumptions. Because if we take the wrong assumptions into it, we're going to end up with something which we don't want to see for the future.
Yeah. I think that's probably the understatement of the century about how it's going to get a bit wild in the next 10 years. Like there's all building towards 2030 and our complete demise. But that's nice that you're optimistic, at least, like that you feel that there will be reform. That's good, because a lot of people I speak to are far more pessimistic than that. And like, honestly, sometimes I'm like optimistic, and I think, there's enough people with a very similar story to yourself, where you sort of 2008 like made you quite skeptical of the system, and then by the time that lockdowns rolled around and the the disastrous economic policy that monetary policy that resulted from the lockdowns and the need to pay for things when we weren't making anything, it baffles me that no one saw this shit coming with the inflation and the debasing of the currency. But like, right, okay. So obviously people saw it coming, right? On the internet, people saw it coming. Anyone, like I remember my Weimar Germany history lessons, like that shit didn't leave me, right? And you've been in that world a little bit, in the venture capital, like finance world, in amongst maybe some of these like higher up politicians, especially in the Conservative Party. Like, were they aware of what they were doing? Are they just stupid, or are they willfully ignorant, or were they just pretending like it was all going to work out fine? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they're so deep in the system that they cannot imagine an alternative to the system. So, look, there's a couple of points there. Let's just go back on the optimism one. I mean, normally people, when they listen to me, they think that I'm thoroughly unoptimistic. To be clear, I think that the next decade, the 2020s, is going to be a period of absolute crisis, and then we have the opportunity to reform, having come out the other side of it. But we are nowhere near that point. So, yes, optimistic that there could be a better future, but we're going to have to go through a hell of a lot of disruption, because people simply cannot see outside of the bubble that they're currently operating. I think the vast majority of people that you speak to in your life, they're going to be, they are still in the narrative where it is going to be, you change your faces and everything will change. I'm sort of reminded of that film. I think it's called 50 First Dates, where every morning this girl wakes up and she basically forgets her entire life. Every day is a new day for her. That's basically our political system at the moment. Every time we change the prime minister or we change the political party, everybody thinks that the whole game resets and that all options are now on the table. That's not really what's going on. Is that the game is in checkmate, and we can change the player, but the new player that sits down is still in checkmate, and that comes out the other side. Okay. Now, getting on to your point about the economists and people who saw it coming, the problem is economics is not like physics. So in physics, you can control all the variables, you can run an experiment, and you can see what happens. With politics and economics, you don't do that. You can only ever try and draw lessons from history, and then it's incredibly arguable as to which way it went. And to oversimplify, there are effectively sort of two schools in economics. One is the mainstream one, which I'm very much not a part of, and then there's the sort of the non-mainstream ones. One of the bigger schools in the non-mainstream ones would be the Austrian economists that I would ascribe myself to. And we very much did see these things coming, because we look at things like money and debt. The problem is that if you have that mindset where you think about things like money and debt and the level of government spending and the way that debt is going up, inevitably it draws you to the conclusion that actually government needs to spend less. Now, by definition, those type of thinkers are not welcome in government. So those type of economists do not get jobs in governments. They don't get promoted. They don't end up running, departments and so on. The other kind do. The kind that think that it's all about demand. But you just need to stimulate. You just need to encourage people to go out and spend. You just need to sort of, put the offer out there. And the economy will grow on the back of that, because their natural conclusion is always that you need to increase the size of government. You need to always spend more. You need to make people go out and spend. Don't save. give people an incentive to go out there. I mean, you even hear ideas like we should put expiry notes on banknotes so that your money will literally disappear if you haven't rushed out and spend it.
Wait, that's a real thing? Someone's suggesting that?
I have heard people seriously suggest it, and it's making a comeback now with the thinking around central bank digital currencies, because that would actually give you the ability to pay money into a bank account on Monday and make it disappear on Sunday if you haven't spent it. But if you come from the mindset where it's all about stimulating demand, you'll come to that. So those are the people that end up in the senior positions in government. And that's why they can't see this stuff coming, because their mental tool set does not allow them to effectively.
Okay. I mean, so actually in quite fits quite nicely actually here, this story that I saw this week. So hang on, let me just pull this up so people can see it. So it is the announcement that former Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke has won the Nobel Prize in Economics.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest joke I think I have ever seen. I cannot believe that this man, literally the person who kicked off all the insane money printing in 2009, 2008, 2009. He is the man getting, as we see our financial system, the fiat money system, reach this, it feels like we're at the end. It feels like we're witnessing the going out of business sale as they just print and print and print. And they tried to taper it off numerous times, and every single time it takes about a week, and then they just reverse the decision. So that's an interesting question. I mean, who do we blame for this? And it's always easy to point to individuals, and we can say that Ben Bernanke kicked it off, and he deserves blame. And actually, more recently, we've been having the discussion here in the UK. It's about the mini budget and about the actions that Liz Truss took. Now, let me be very clear. I am absolutely no fan of the political system and the established politicians. My view is actually that every single politician that voted for lockdown should be jailed for what they did. So, but be clear that I am not in favour of any of these people. Mm-hmm. However, when I hear the media and commentators sort of jumping on Liz Truss and saying that it's all her fault that the current period of tumult because she cut some taxes. Look, the problem is the UK national debt is 2.3 trillion. With her tax cut, she was looking to add about 45 trillion a year to that. So does she deserve blame? Yes, but don't forget the other 98% of the debt. That has been accumulated over the past decades. And the problem is that, we like I said, it's like the 50 First Dates film. We keep on resetting our memory every time a new person comes in. But actually the system that we've got to is this. Now, and then you go on to the thinking about, okay, well, who's to blame for that? Why did we get here? Is it our politicians' fault? Because, you have not had the opportunity, in basically any part of the Western world, to vote for politicians who want to reduce government spending. Even the period of so-called austerity that we had after there was a change of government from Labour to Conservative, and Labour, yes, they did rack up the debt like all governments do, and then we sort of had this story about austerity. Government spending never actually went down; it just did not increase at the rate that it had been previously scheduled to increase. So government spending always increases. So I used to think that voting for right-wing politicians was the right way to do this, because they would be likely to bring down government spending and solve its underlying issues. But that's not possible to do, because all of them increase this problem that we've got. And where we've got to now is, why did we have that quantitative easing that you referred to? Well, the reason we have quantitative easing is because there's too much debt and nobody wants to buy it. So the central bank has to step in and buy it as well. And we're almost certainly going to get the sibling of quantitative easing. Well, we've got it now in the UK. It's effectively a form of yield control, where the central bank comes in and says, okay, we're going to cap gilt yields at a certain level and we're going to continue to buy. It's because there's too much debt. Now, at some point, we're going to have the conversation about how are we going to get out of this debt? And that's why I sound really pessimistic, because there are only a few options and all of them are bad. I'll lay them out if you like. But maybe that'd be good, because I think I have an idea of some of the suggestions, but please.
Okay, so there's the fantasy suggestion, which is you don't need to worry about the debt because we will just magically grow our way out of it. The economy does have a sort of trend rate of growth, and the problem is that debt has been increasing beyond that level. So if you were to increase debt in line with the natural rate of productivity increase, you wouldn't really have an issue. Then debt would serve a useful function, and debt is effectively a useful thing. If you're a farmer and you spend, I don't know, 100 grand on a combine harvester, and that increases your profitability by 20 grand a year, whatever, you can do the calculation, you can work it out. What we've been doing though is we've been borrowing money not for productive purposes, but for basically to maintain current spending, so we can go out and have nice meals and buy TVs and so on. So the idea that we could go out and just grow our way out of it when we are increasing the debt beyond that sort of natural rate that the economy increases, that's not going to happen. It's especially not going to happen in our current environment. Why is that? Because we're a heavily regulated, heavily taxed economy, which pushes down that rate of economic growth. And the other thing, and some people will say it's laudable, but you have to recognize the reality of it, is that we are transitioning from a denser form of energy to a lower return form of energy, so going on to renewables. Now, lots of people may say that that's laudable and that's fine, but it is a lower return on investment energy. So that again is also going to subtract from the rate of growth, and some people will say that that's worth it, but still it's lowering growth. So, and we're not going to get out of growth. And then in the UK you've got additional things as well, such as I'm the sort of person who probably should go out and start a business. There's no way I'm going to do it in the UK because I now know that the government can wave its hand and say that you have to shut down for 2 years, and you'll be left carrying all of the costs, and we still want our taxes and we still want our rates, but sorry, you can't operate. Well, unless I have a McDonald's franchise, then I'd be allowed to stay open because obviously they're in line with the health agenda. Yes. Let's say I opened a gym, that would not be in line with the health agenda, and therefore that's the sort of thing that could be closed down. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to grow our way out of it unless there is a fundamental change to technology. Okay. So what's the next method? Which is we deal with the debt in the honest method, which is we default on it.
That's the Greek method, right?
Yeah. There's a big problem with that, and it sounds good, doesn't it? It sounds good. We're just going to say, sorry, you don't get your money.
Who do we owe the money to? Isn't it ourselves, technically?
Well, basically everybody owes money to everybody else. It's just all over the place. But the big problem is that in our financial system, we used to have a financial system that was underpinned by gold. We now have a financial system which is underpinned by debt, especially sovereign debt. So a lot of the way that the banks construct their balance sheet is they own sovereign debt, and then that is the collateral which they can then lend out and start doing other things. Okay. And this is sort of embedded throughout the financial system. So if you knock out that collateral level, you've basically wiped out money, because debt is money in our system. So do
you want to explain that statement just a little bit for people who maybe don't quite grasp what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the way money is created is we create debt, and then debt spends like money. If I borrow £100 and give it to you, you don't get it, and you think, well, okay, this is debt, I can't do it. You've got £100, you can go out and spend it how you like, and the creation of this debt is, I think Ray Dalio, there's actually a really interesting video if you want to understand how the economy works. There's a video called Principles by Ray Dalio. It's about 30 minutes long. He wrote a book as well. You don't need to read the book because the video is so good. And he goes into this, and he explains the whole piece of what I'm talking about now. And he ran the numbers on the US economy, and I think this was back in 2010. And I believe what he found was that the base money was something like 3 trillion. And credit on top of that was another 50 trillion. So,
whoa, hang on a second. So and it's gone up significantly since then, of course. Yes.
But that shows why you can't pay off the debt, because there isn't enough money to pay off the debt. And it's actually far worse than that, because unless you increase the amount of debt all of the time, you can't actually pay off the interest on the debt. So if we just stopped creating debt at this point, we would start defaulting on the interest payments on the debt that we already have. So that debt would start to be destroyed. The total amount of money in the system would be destroyed. And therefore, we would be able to pay fewer of the interest on the loans, and more money would. And so basically, you go into this deflationary collapse.
Mm-hmm.
So in order for our system to survive at this point, the amount of debt must continue to increase all the time, and because there is interest on top of that, the amount of debt that you create every year must increase. So you must have a permanently expanding debt bubble. And if you ever stop that, then the whole system goes into deflationary collapse and the system unwinds on itself.
Right. So we have to...
It's horrifying.
Yeah, that is horrifying.
Yeah.
So basically what we have to do is reach a situation where the growth of the economy exceeds the amount of debt interest that we have to pay somehow.
Yes. And
okay.
Good luck with that.
Well,
I have no idea how that could be achieved.
Sex.
Well, actually, okay, yeah. So I mean, that's the point. Okay, so when I criticised this monetary system that we had, and I said it all starts to go wrong in 1971 when we left the gold standard.
Yes. It's not 73, 71 at America.
Yeah. Well, I tend to base everything I think around on the US system because the dollar basically dominates everything. So I tend to think of dollars all the time. But
that's right.
Okay, so when I start to criticize this system and I say it's fundamentally flawed in the way that it's structured, I then have to address, well, why did it actually work for the last 50 years? And actually, your point is correct because you had the baby boomers, which was the largest generation we'd ever seen.
Because that's the last time that we successfully did this, where we had monstrous amounts of sovereign debt and we were able to grow the economy beyond the size of the debt.
It was slightly different in the 70s, and the debt problem that they're dealing with then is primarily private debt. So
I was thinking post World War II,
the 40s.
Yeah, where we were able, because so much needed to be rebuilt and invested in. That investment became incredibly fruitful, and we went from, I think it was a national debt of 250% of GDP. To well below 100. So I don't know what it eventually came down to, but yeah, obviously that's because we made massive investment in a country that had been bombed for 4 years. There was a lot of economic gains to be had there, whereas those, I don't know. Do you buy the arguments, like, because I see people argue about this and they say that we could deal with this situation by, like, the modern monetary theory people are like, right, we need to take this ability that we have to create debt, except invest in things that will provide value to the country and the economy, and therefore it makes sense to use that ability to create money. So they would say, okay, we're going to invest in like housing or hospitals or public transport infrastructure or nuclear sites or, some sort of other renewable energy. Like, what do you make of that argument that we could, like, if we took this ability to create money and like put it to use on things that were actually growing the economy and not just buying up like massive like amounts of Bank of England bonds or handing it straight to private companies under the guise of like price controls, or just handing it out to people for staying home and doing nothing. That would have worked. That would have worked maybe 20 or 30 years ago. That it was possible that maybe that would have worked. But the problem we've got now is, like I say, the rate of growth in debt that we need now outstrips the rate of underlying productivity growth. Okay.
Especially when you start to add on the energy sort of issues as well. I mean, let's touch on the energy issues as well. So, in the news, we've heard a lot recently about the currency weakness. Now, in the short term, the strength of a currency is a confidence game. It's do the buyers of your currency believe the officials and that they're credible and all that kind of stuff. That's only the short term. In the long term, the strength of your currency is a physics problem. How much do you produce? How much food, goods, services, how much energy do you produce? It's those basic underlying factors. Now, all of those are either heavily constrained or in some cases they're going flat out into reverse. So no wonder we're having these underlying weaknesses. So to come back to your point is can we simply grow out of it? I don't think that we can, because that underlying growth does simply not match up. It was basically decided well, at least 20 years ago, you can make arguments for longer. The central bankers and politicians wanted to see a growth rate which was above that sort of natural growth rate. They wanted to get elected now because the time scale of politics is very different to the time scale of our lives and the time scale of economies. And so they wanted to bring forward all of this spending. And that's the essential problem we got now. So, to come back to the how do you get out of it, I don't think you can grow, at least not with a fundamental change in technology, something that blindsides us. If nuclear fusion arrives tomorrow and general artificial intelligence arrives tomorrow, yeah, maybe the underlying rate of growth will go and we can get out of it that way. You can't just default on the debt, because with the system that we got at the moment, you basically wipe out the monetary system. Now, could we replace the monetary system we have now with something in the future? Possibly. I don't think gold is going to work, because gold leads basically to a large degree of centralization. And maybe in time blockchain stuff like Bitcoin could be ready, but I don't think we're there now. So that's out as well. Another option is that we just pay it down honestly. And that would involve cutting government spending in the region of 70%, but maintaining taxes where they are now.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's not
How the hell
happen.
is that? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, do you think you could get elected by starting up a new political party and say, my manifesto is that we're going to keep taxes where they are now, and we're going to halve the size of the NHS. We're going to scrap the military. Maybe we have Dad's army or something, or whatever it is. We can probably keep most of the roads. We can just maintain them. And by the way, you're educating, kids yourself after the age of, 12 or whatever it is. We do the primary, but everything else, there is absolutely no way you can get elected. I'll give you a recent example of that. So the Tory leadership campaign. I mean, both of them were basically advocating more borrowing and more spending. It's just that one of them was saying, I'm going to give you tax breaks now. And she didn't really want to address the spending side because that's unpopular. And overwhelmingly, people went for, just give me the money now. Yeah, I want it right now. I want the tax cuts right now. Don't worry about all the rest of it. Now, again, can you blame the public? I mean, do they really understand that? Have they really been? Has someone actually sort of sat down and broken it down to them? But I sort of suspect that if you really did explain the whole picture to these people, they would. And I'm not talking about just the 60,000 people that voted in the Tory leadership game. I think basically everybody does. Is everybody basically just says, I want more now. So it's impossible. It's impossible to get elected doing it that way. So then you come to option 4, and option 4 is basically you try and inflate your way out of this problem. You just carry on printing money. You keep the system going. Yes, it will blow up eventually, but maybe that'll be 20 years from now, and that'll be somebody else's problem. Now, given the alternatives, wiping out the monetary system, which given that money is half of every transaction that occurs in the world, well, almost, you would basically wipe out all supply chains. So unless you had a new monetary system, because you can't operate an economy at our size with barter. So you'd need to have a new system. And if you didn't have that in place at the same time as you collapse one financial system, you're looking at mass starvations and economic collapse. Yeah. So people aren't going to go for that. They're not going to go for keep taxes high and slash spending 70%. The growth thing is a fantasy. And so the only thing that you're left with is that we are going to have to print more money and try and keep the system going and just continue to expand that debt bubble. And now what that will mean is that if you expand the amount of money, financial assets will respond very quickly to that. So if you are a wealthy person, you tend to hold a lot of your wealth in stocks and shares and other stuff like that, or land, housing, art, or whatever. If you increase the amount of money, the denomination of those things, which is basically just a fraction of the total amount of money, changes very, very quickly. And so those people will get wealthier. And the people who don't have a lot of financial assets, who are basically wage earners, wages do respond to inflation, but never as much.
Slowly.
And it takes years. If you get if there's a big inflationary event and you get a pay rise within 4 years, you're doing very well. Typically, it takes longer than that, and you will never get back the same amount.
Well, don't tell me that. I'm trying to get a pay rise soon.
Well, I mean, yeah, good luck with that. And the amount of pay rise that you get, even if you go to your boss and say, well, this is CPI, well, CPI is manipulated and several percentage points behind what the actual inflation rate is.
Yeah,
Your boss isn't going to give you he's not going to give you, CPI plus 3%, is he? And it's optimistic that the amount of inflation is actually CPI plus 3%. It's probably even more than that.
Well,
so
I moved to London
right.
6 months ago. Electric has doubled. Which does our heat as well, so that's doubled. My rent is up 12.5%. Food is up in the 30 to 50%. I don't understand I don't understand what thing they're using to balance out CPI. How it's they calculate it based on a whole bunch of different goods. I'd love to know what the things that they're stacking up at the bottom of this formula where there's things that haven't changed in price at all. Are they heavily weighting the McDonald's Saver menu in the CPI calculations?
Well, it's not only that, and they substitute things as well. So I mean, that if there was a time when the inflation calculation included steak, and then they decided that because the price of steak had gone up too much, people would probably substitute to tofu or some other damn thing. So they swap things out to give a lower CPI number. And actually, it's entirely possible for items in the basket to go up and for that to be counted as a decrease. So, for example, technological items like a smartphone, and the price of your your Apple iPhone, you might go from $800 to $1,600, but they look at it and they say, well, now it does this and this and this, and it's got a better camera, and you can do emails from it, and all of these extra things, and therefore that's actually a decrease in inflation, even though the price has gone up.
Really?
Yeah, I mean it is rigged throughout.
Why are all these government calculations always like this? Why?
Well, because nobody ever checks. And the people that do, like me, really what I should do is because I can play this game. I've got some financial assets, so I really should just shut up about it and just let them print and basically trade my way to a bigger house or whatever, because I can play this game. That's what most people in the financial services do. I just find it so utterly, thoroughly, morally repugnant. Plus, I'm also looking ahead to sort of my children's generation that I see where this is going to get us. And this inflationary option, which I actually believe the vast majority of people would choose compared to those other options, which are even worse, is going to lead to greater and greater wealth disparity. I mean, this whole thing is thoroughly broken, but everybody is still trapped in that mentality. Well, as long as I change from people with those rosette to those rosette, even though they follow the same processes, they're taking advice from the same people, and ultimately, 99% of government policy will remain unchanged. But the 2% of the bit that gets talked about in the media, slight changes to tax rates, slight changes to how the money is allocated, that will occupy people while this system basically grinds itself into the dirt because it's unsustainable.
See, right, this is what I was trying to articulate. I did a great podcast with Marina Purkis 2 weeks ago. She's sort of a lefty commentator. Really nice woman. Really,
I watched the most recent one with her. So okay, I've got an idea. Yeah.
So we had quite a lengthy discussion. It was primarily based around this idea that she was like, we have to vote Labour in because the Tories are hopeless, and I am just like, neither of these cunts will fix this problem. None of them. They will not even mention it. And what you've mentioned there about wealth disparity is something I brought up to this guy, Professor David Edgerton, who is a history of science and or professor of science, technology, and history at King's College London. And he, very smart guy, has talked a lot about emergent technology, about the monetary system, about just he's a clued in man. And I was like, look, right, there's a fantastic book called The Wealth of Nations, or sorry, not The Wealth of Nations, Why Nations Fail, and it basically discusses in it this idea of inequality and how once inequality becomes so disparate, I'm not an equity, let's all have the same communist moron, right? But there's a point at which the poorer people in society, which tends to then increasingly become more and more and more and more as like this small portion of people who are holding the assets and the massive swathes of assets become more and more wealthy, and the people at the bottom have nothing, and eventually they just turn around and go, well, fuck you, like, we can't win this game, so let's just fucking flip the table and see what happens, right? And I was like, does anyone in politics consider this as a really dangerous thing? And he was just like, oh, people don't start revolutions because of this. And I was like, what? Like, is everyone saying that no one else seems to think this is a problem?
We've just had a massive social experiment where we sort of said to people, you know, we're going to bankrupt you, we're going to stop your businesses, we're going to lock you in your home, and as long as you can do the messaging tier of it right, you know, you can get away with basically anything.
Yeah, but people weren't like, right, okay, there was definitely people who were going hungry. I've heard some horrible stories about like small business owners, taxi drivers, people who worked in hospitality, friends of mine as well. But the majority were given enough money from the government to not have to worry, right? They were not starving, most people, right? I guarantee there was people who did. But most people weren't starving. If that happens, right, and we get to a point where like 14 million people in Britain are living under the poverty line. Obviously, that's a statistic that gets, like, the calculation is different. But that's still a horrifyingly high number, right? And the level, like, Britain
just change the definitions then.
Yeah, well, okay,
just distract people with streaming content. I mean, there's a whole number of ways you can do it. I mean, I honestly believe that if everybody understood the financial system the way I do, you know, there would be heads on spikes tomorrow. But as long as you can distract, I mean, you can always give people a reason. You know, don't focus on, you know, the debt and the spending and all these sort of decades long accumulated problems. Get into a big argument about Brexit or Putin or, you know, whatever it else. But as you know, have really vigorous debate on these sort of touch points that don't really, you know, affect the sort of the structure of the system. You know, I remember back in 2008, there was a very brief window, and it was really only sort of 2 or 3 weeks that were the beginnings of the Occupy Wall Street thing, where both the left and the right were looking at the system itself. They were looking at the banking system and saying there was something wrong here.
Yeah.
And after that, you know, very quickly, identity politics got corporate sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And we were pushed back into the same old game of, you know, gender versus gender, race versus race, whatever it is, as long as it's not looking at this underlying sort of financial system. Mm. So yeah, I think that they can. I think they can keep this going. So I'm always reminded, actually, of this famous image of you mentioned Weimar Republic, of, you know, the guy wheeling his salary home on a wheelbarrow.
Yes, or the kids playing with the blocks of money.
And we always look at that guy and we think to ourselves, you know, that's ridiculous. I look at it and I see something else. I see a guy who is still pushing the wheelbarrow. As ridiculous as that is, he still pushes the wheelbarrow because he still believes in the system. He still cannot imagine alternative. He still thinks to himself, yeah, I need to get this big wheelbarrow of Deutschmarks home because, you know, what's my alternative?
Well, do you not think he's just like trying to feed his family in any way possible?
Well, the guy in the photo was quite well dressed, so I think he was I think he was a boss chap.
Well, everyone back then was well dressed.
No
sweats about.
But people are not prepared to consider the alternative. You know, people are not even prepared to question the basis of the political system that we've got. So the reason we have the political system that we've got, where we sort of elect these representatives and then they go off and they sort of have untrammeled power for 4 years, is because when the system was designed, you voted for your local guy, and then he literally got on a horse and rode to London, and then you didn't see him for 4 years. And, you know, then he would come back on his horse, and you'd have another election again. Clearly, we are capable of doing something a little bit better. I'm not saying that I've got the solutions here. I'm not saying that I can tell you I can design a new political system for you. But what I am saying is that we've basically started to reach the end of the road of this political system with the way that it operates on those sort of 4 years elected representative cycles. Because take Liz Truss, and if she comes in, she's behind in the polls on day one. She's got 2 years to the next election. why the hell wouldn't you roll the dice on a growth agenda?
Mm.
And you can even see why she went with the tax cuts, but she slow rolled the spending decreases because to balance the equation, because she knew that'd be an unpopular part. But she's making the right political play, but that doesn't match with
right political play.
Yeah, but
like I don't know. There's a lot of people struggling at the minute with the rising cost of everything, and to come in and immediately make your headline thing to give tax breaks to the people who aren't suffering seems like a really fucking stupid move to me. I don't know. Because like I don't know. Maybe this is the left wing side of me thinking, but like I am always of the opinion that you give people who will go out and spend the money immediately, i.e. most of us, the tax breaks, instead of allowing tax breaks for the people whose wealth has already been monstrously inflated over the past 2-3 years because of this money printing.
But none of that is changing.
Prices.
The system that rewards the wealthy getting wealthier through the accumulation of financial assets, which respond better to inflation, none of that is changing. Even if she didn't give the tax cuts, if Labour came in tomorrow, they would increase spending. I'm sure they would give more hands out to, I don't know. Liz Truss is not short on the handout. She's doing the energy price cap, which is actually far bigger bill than any of these tax cuts.
Yeah. What do you think of that? Because to me, do you know what it looks like? It looks like looting. It looks like they've taken a bunch of energy companies who have made more money than ever in the past year. They've made 170 billion in profits, and they're now price gouging. Whilst now that we're going to print a bunch of money, more debt, wonderful, and we're just going to hand it straight to them and go here. And they're not even reducing the prices. It's still going up, even though the gas prices are falling. What do you think?
I mean, again, there's sort of deeper problems there because, these energy companies have been told that, we're transitioning away from what you do. Mm-hmm. So they have spent
without
the
actually
last
doing
decade.
any transition. This is the stupidest bit. We haven't, you see, if we'd invested.
Yeah, because the technology isn't there.
Yeah, well, I mean,
to
deal with the entire economy, it's not there.
So renewables are perfectly fine. When the sun is shining and the wind is blowing, and if you want to, basically get through a night, or ideally at some point in winter, you need increases in battery technology, and that battery technology simply doesn't exist. So I'm not against solar at all. I think it's. I mean, if you've got a factory, and your operational hours are daylight hours, it's a simple return on investment calculation to see, okay, I need to put these many solar panels on my roof, and this will lower my energy bill by this blah blah blah. In point solutions, I quite like it, and having a mix of it, because we do use more energy during the day. Yeah, perfectly sensible. The problem is that we just don't have the battery technology to store any of this energy overnight. We are, for some reason, afraid of nuclear technology because we think that it's going to blow up and Godzilla's going to kill us all, or whatever the hell the argument is there. So we've decided to go basically all in on, basically sort of Russian energy. And then once we've made that, we put all our chips on the table on saying, that Russia is going to be the marginal supplier of energy. Well, then we sanction them. So the problem is there just simply isn't enough energy. And these energy companies that you talked about, they've been playing defensively for the last 10 years because they've been told that they're no longer the future. So they haven't been investing in additional energy supplies. So, I mean, again, you go back to Nick Clegg in 2010 saying that why the hell would we build a nuclear power plant? It won't be ready until 2020. He was just baffled by the very concept of doing that. And this is the thing, the timescale of politics doesn't match up. And it's like what I said about the currency. In the long term, you need to build out the physics problem. You need to increase supply. You need to increase production. You need to increase energy, and all of those things. And it's very easy to point the finger, where we are now. But what I'm sort of continually doing is say, you look back and look at the environment in which these decisions were made. We have been structurally on the wrong direction for decades, and that's catching up now. And it's very easy to say, okay, well, we're going to be upset with the people who happen to be in charge. And everyone's going to do this. And then they're going to change the person in charge. And then they're going to find that actually doesn't make any difference anyway. So then they're going to change it again. And if you've got a left-wing government and you're naturally left-wing, you're going to think, well, we just need to change the leader. which is basically the same thing that the right has been doing because they've been in power for the last 20 years, and they think, okay, well, we've got the right-wing government, so that can't be the problem. It must be the leader. So let's keep shuffling leader until we find. No, it's not going to work. Whichever way, it's not going to work. You need to address the underlying system, and I think ultimately it's all going to come back to the incentives, and the incentives are basically formatted by the monetary system that we have and the financialized system that we have, and the fact that we have this sort of debt-based inflationary debt system. And I think ultimately it's all going to come down to that. But because people cannot imagine alternative, and because people are not willing to take the horrific short-term pain when making a break with that, we always come back to we're going to get more printing, which will result in a larger financial services sector and a larger government, because effectively the money is created at the nexus between the financial system and government. So those things will increase. People with financial assets and big houses, they will get richer, and the people who earn the wages will get poorer. But like I say, even if you ask those wage earners, we can fundamentally fix the system by doing these things, they would still vote for the inflation option because it's the least worst one.
Yeah, that's concerning.
And effectively, I think what we have to get to is this system has to grind ever deeper into the dirt over the 20s until it becomes so utterly broken and so utterly unviable that people are willing to consider alternatives, and hopefully an alternative will emerge. I would like to think that alternative could be Bitcoin. In 10 years' time, it could be ready for mainstream. It's probably not there now. We probably don't have an alternative at the moment. A lot of people think gold, but if you want, we can get into why I don't think that will work. But I don't think it's going to be that. So, I see no other option than a really painful, grinding 20s until people are willing to think the unthinkable, and hopefully, something comes along.
Yeah, and I mean the problem with the issue being that when you get to that point of crisis, I would argue for the last 40 to 50 years, almost every single time that these crisis moments emerge, not just financially or economically, but just crisis moments have emerged, they have been used in order to further the goals of people with this agenda, essentially. With like the globalist, fiat printing, neoliberal, I don't know, whatever the fuck you want to call it, like just this seemingly reigning supreme ideology that occupies the minds of almost anyone in any position of power. And I am concerned, like you mentioned the CBDCs earlier, and I'm beyond terrified that is exactly where we are going, and even faster than 2030. Because China have been trialing it for 2 years now. I was talking to a guy called Matt Agoris recently from the Free Thought Project. And he was telling me that they've been trialing it in China for 2 fucking years. The tech is there. That's the scary bit. Like, it's literally there. And the worst bit is that basically no one outside of, like, the bubble of people that we talk to about this has any idea that it's even coming. Like, they don't even know what a fucking CBDC is. Like, let alone, like, how fucking horrifying it is. But
so that's what upset me so much about 2008, because as we talked about, my political instincts are more on the right. I'm actually very comfortable with a fairly brutal form of capitalism, because our natural condition is rooting around with sticks in the dirt. The only reason why we live in such unimaginable comfort that we do is because we have brutally tested what is the most efficient way to extract resources from whatever amount of resources that we have, and those who have found a more efficient way have been extremely well rewarded for it and become rich, and that provides an incentive structure. But the flip side of that incentive structure is if you bet too large on something and you screw it up, you get wiped out. And the problem in 2008 was people were placing these ever increasing bets on, well, whatever it was. And when the time came to pay the bill, because it turned out that they had made a mistake, the problem got kicked upstairs to the sovereign level, and you sort of had these bailouts. And basically, what we know now is that so I mean, you mentioned ideology. I don't actually think it's ideology. I think for these people, ideology is essentially irrelevant. I think what matters to them is their own wealth and power. And they will adopt whatever ideology is necessary to keep that wealth and power. Now, the paradigm for the last sort of 20, 30 years has been capitalism. But I think that what we've got now is capitalism has been sort of perverted to the point of effectively communism, which is, the state basically decides the winners. You can, if you're a large firm, you can place these bets, and if you get it wrong, then we'd be there to bail you out. So it's heads you win, tails you don't lose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you come on the stuff like the Great Reset stuff, so the digital IDs and the central bank digital currencies, I think that is going to be the sort of the 2028 version of 2008, which is to make sure that the people who made these mistakes don't lose. Now, some people on the sphere that I'm more identified with, the dissident right, they think that what these people are trying to do is crash the system in order to seize control of it all.
It's not just the people on the right that think that.
Okay, well, I don't actually think that's what's happening.
Okay.
I think that the people who are in charge are perfectly happy with the system now because they are currently wealthy and powerful, but they see that this financial system that we have now is a house of cards and it could collapse at any time. And they're worried that on the other side of that collapse, they will no longer be wealthy and powerful. And so they're thinking ahead, and they're thinking, if we get to that point, what tools do we need in order to retain our wealth and power? And those are increasingly authoritarian mechanisms such as the digital IDs and the central bank digital currencies. So I don't think they're looking to deliberately crash the system because they're perfectly happy now because they have all the wealth and power. What those mechanisms are doing is ensures that they remain wealthy and powerful on the other side of the collapse that they see could well happen because it's this big house of cards. And that's why, every big proposal now is about finding ways to control us more.
Yes.
And ever greater techniques.
Yeah. Which is really disturbing. Really, really, really disturbing.
Yeah.
The most disturbing part about it, and this just gets me beyond belief. I can't believe that there is a portion of the country, many of whom are on the left, who were so unbelievably fine with the lockdowns, and yet continue to this day. Actually, I'll call you out. Femi, you can't. Just... Maybe that's
I don't know who that is.
Maybe that's a bit harsh. He was Our Future, Our Choice anti-Brexit campaigner, like a pro-second referendum dude, who used to have a lot of reasonable points about how the MPs that were taking us out of Europe didn't understand the thing that they were trying to take us out of. Whether they were ultimately correct is a completely different thing. But he made some good points about how, you'd expect the people who are, proposing this to understand the thing that they were removing us from, right? And he got a lot of traction online with viral videos trying to get MPs to explain the EU, be like, do you understand the single market? And they can't because it's a complex thing. And anyway, he loves to call this government fascist. Loves it. They're fascists. They are literally Hitler. And yet they have zero issue. They had zero issue with the potential for the vaccine passports, the lockdowns, the removal of freedoms of speech online when it's about something that they disagree when it's about something they think is wrong, they're fine with it, right? And when it's something that they care about, all of a sudden free speech is really important. It's like,
I don't think there is much, or if any, ideology in there. Ideology is a post hoc rationalization. What it is, it's tribalism. It's this is my tribe and this is what we want and this gives us power. And all of that rationale is just your conscious brain trying to catch up with your limbic system. You're motivated by fear and greed and other sort of base emotions. This drives your behavior. What's best for me, what's best for my group, and then you basically build a sort of a frontal cortex model that puts that together all afterwards. But it is ultimately all wealth and power with these guys.
But these people aren't lots of the people who are fine with it aren't wealthy or powerful. That's the thing that scares me. It's like you're calling them fascists, but you're fine with them being fascists. That's the.
But the same thing is going to happen to get us the central bank digital currency.
Yeah, that's what concerns me.
They got us through the lockdowns by controlling the narrative that's saying that effectively you were a morally impure person if you didn't believe in lockdown. I mean, lockdowns were an illusion anyway. And, the vast majority of people continued to go to work and do their thing. It's just the people who speak for a living the laptop class, people like us, effectively, we got to
I can't
stay
really claim to look down on
so
them.
it looked to us like there was a lockdown happening, and when we couldn't go to restaurants so much. But actually, the working class people, they carried on mixing and interacting and doing all of those things. They just had to wear a stupid unnecessary mask to go along with the whole theatre of the thing. But they controlled the narrative. Okay, so what's going to happen when we come to the point where they're ready to roll out the central bank digital currency? It's going to be, you can't afford anything. The government loves you, and we're going to help you, and we're going to give you money. So if you sign up for one of these central bank digital currencies, we will pay £300 a month or 600, whatever it is, £1,000 a month into your account.
You're the second person to tell me that this is going to happen in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, and then everybody's going to go for it. And I can guarantee you that your friends and neighbours who haven't really been keen to keep up on this, as soon as it gets to the news, they're going to be looking at you and saying, "You heartless bastard. Why wouldn't you want a central bank digital currency? This is to help people." Mm-hmm. It's the same as so you asked me earlier, what did I think of the energy crisis thing? Yeah, I think they're going to pay your energy bill at the expense of your food bill, because more money will need to be created. So the denominator goes up. So everything else gets divided by the denominator is divided by the amount of stuff. So if you pay for my energy bill this winter, I'll be paying for it with the extra cost of my food bill and my mortgage and everything else will go up if you give me free money now. So when we get to the central bank digital currency thing, the point, that they will construct a narrative, and actually it's a narrative that will sound good given the things that I've talked about, which is, in the past, whenever we've had to do bailouts, we've had to introduce it from the top down level, and it's captured by financial services effectively. With a central bank digital currency, we can do it from the bottom up. We can pay this money into your account, and it's going to look really good. What they won't tell you, of course, is they will be doing other money creation things all over the place. So don't worry. The elites and the wealthy and the powerful, they're still going to get way more money than you're going to get. And actually, you saw this with the stimulus bill in the US over the lockdowns. It was however many billions that package was, and then I think the Americans, what did they get? Was it $1,200 check or something like that? And it was a tiny, tiny slither of the total thing. So yeah, when central banks digital currencies come, all of your normie friends are going to be thinking that you're evil if you don't want them.
Thankfully, I don't have that. Yep. I don't have that many friends that are like that. Most of them are aware that I'm crazy, or are in the same boat, or are crazier. So yeah, like so. To try and end on a slightly more positive note. Given that you worked in investment in emergent technology, and you said that theoretically some massive leap forward in technology could be something that could, help us manage the growth that we would require in order to grow our way out of this debt. Should we be investing massive amounts of money in emergent technology as like a Hail Mary pass? Be like, right, okay, we got one shot at this. Someone needs to invent something that blows the world.
Yeah, that's not the sort of thing you can organise from the state level. You can't pick winners. I mean, that will come out of the blue, and
I don't know if you can say that. There's a lot of tech that's come out of state investment, like a lot of things, like GPS, radar. Like government was involved in massively expanding the electricity and phone lines that provided like massive amounts of economic growth. So I don't know if you can say it's definitely can't
so the bit where I think where the state should focus is on those large infrastructure projects. So certainly they want to get the energy situation sorted out, which at this current time it sort of has to be fracking and nuclear or making peace with Putin. I mean, pick one, but you're not or all of them. But you're not going to do it with renewables yet, not unless there's a leap forward in battery technology. So energy technology, battery technology, that is going to improve, and in the next 10 years, it could be viable to run a significantly higher proportion of our grid with this. But yeah, so I am optimistic because there is strong technological progress coming through on a whole different range of things. The problem is the politicians are sort of they want it all right now. And they try and manipulate the system rather than letting sort of winners naturally emerge. Now, am I optimistic about the future? I think what we're going to do. And okay, so the reason why I haven't gone back into doing a normie job, but the reason why I'm sort of wasting my time doing stuff and podcasts and speaking is because I'm so concerned that as we go through this period of disruption, Something is going to come on the other side of it. And if we don't understand why we got into this mess, because the government is the elites, they're going to construct a narrative as to why everything is going wrong.
They're good at that.
Now, yeah. And now, before it was because, there was a virus and, bad people are trying to kill your grandma because they're trying to, open their local shop or whatever it is. The current one is, all of the problems that we're facing with energy and inflation is Putin's fault. Yes. Now, I'm not saying that Putin is a nice guy, but to blame him for all of our problems, it's ridiculous, but there will always be a scapegoat as we go along. So the reason why I'm so motivated to sort of do all this kind of stuff at the moment is because I want us to go into the period of transition with the right set of assumptions as to how we got there. And there is basically two possible futures out of that. One is that we design a new, I think the whole thing is going to change. The financial system and the political system needs to be renewed. And if we come into that with the right assumptions and we make the right choices and we let the right systems emerge, there is a genuinely bright future for my children in the 40s and 50s. If we let the people who currently control the narrative get to explain why these things are going wrong, and their answer is obviously not going to be their own greed, it's going to be, it's going to be pick whatever scapegoat, and we end up going down the route of, your every political opinion you have is tightly controlled by your digital ID, which is linked to your internet connection, and you're not allowed to have a YouTube account or Twitter account or any other account without linking it to your digital ID. So they get a constant feed of what it is that you believe at all times, and then an algorithm can pass that and assign you whether they do it overtly with Chinese do with their social credit score, they will do that covertly, even if they don't do a sort of overt version of that. Link it with the central bank digital currencies that you must spend your money on these things and you must not spend your money on these things. And we're going to sort of, we'll basically squeeze as much tax as we possibly can out of you and all of that. That is basically sort of digital slavery from that point on. So, which of those two routes we go down, I don't know. And I often sort of flip, it's 60-40 one way or the other way. I'm reminded that actually these people, that they are sat on the top of a house of cards. There's not many of them, and they're very close to losing control of this system as it is. But on the other side, I see that the vast majority of people who get all of their opinions by watching TV can be incredibly easily led. And I'm deeply concerned that unless there is more waking up that goes on, we will end up going down that dark sort of digital slavery route. So it's optimism, but it's heavily tempered that, we could go down the wrong branch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're in a very, 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 very precarious position. And I am very curious to see how we deal with it. So, I guess we'll see what happens in the coming months.
I wish I had more optimism than that, years. But yeah. Yeah, but the main message is don't get too caught up in the party politics or whatever the news cycle is. There are always bigger issues that are driving this, and most of those are the sort of the systems and the incentive structures that we have. And to your point earlier about flipping the board, it's like we've been playing a Monopoly game where somebody has now got all of the hotels, and you're not allowed to end the game. The next few years are going to be very interesting because how long can they keep us playing a game that we've already lost?
Well, I don't know. Buy and hold GameStop, DRS, and that will solve all your problems. That's the best advice I can give to people. Because I'm not even convinced that Bitcoin is definitely the crypto that fixes it. I mean, I think it's the most likely candidate.
Yeah.
But I don't know because there's people pointing out flaws in it.
I don't think it's a sure thing either. I just think it is the best option that we have by far.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it depends which one you mean. Is it BTC, BCH, or BSV?
BTC. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Craig would have something to say about that. He was quite convincing actually when I spoke to him about why Bitcoin is not the panacea that we think. He basically pointed out a lot about the just its upper limit for transactions. Essentially, he wants he's trying to build BSV so it can handle like 10 billion transactions a second because he says there's no way you can replace the global monetary system with a currency that is not capable of doing that.
Okay. Well,
so that's obviously the Lightning
yeah.
Network, and there's
Yeah.
many layers to be built.
Yeah,
on top
that
of
would
it.
be my answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think that probably that's the case, but yeah, we'll see what happens. But anyway, man, I have to go back to work. So I want to thank you for your time. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Do you want to point people towards like stuff, your channel and whatnot here?
Yeah, I mean, I got a Twitter profile which is KingBingo_. It's a completely stupid name, but I joined Twitter 12 years ago, and I didn't think the website was going to be around for longer than 6 months, so I picked a deliberately stupid name just to sort of spite it, and I didn't realize it was going to stick around. And I got a channel which is the Distant Factor, but it's absolutely rubbish because I've yet to learn my skill in terms of production. So probably best you stick to the Twitter thing, and I will relaunch the YouTube channel in some time once I can figure out how to do the whole setup thing. So yeah, thanks.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.